Peter Parker Intern to Bruce Banner by 107th Infantry. Chapter 5. The Meeting. Mrs. Andrews spoke to those who remained. I'll call out your assignments and the older interns who choose you will take you to the department where you are assigned. This is not your exclusive job, but it's a good place for you to start. Zara, Biological Research. A very pretty girl with deep brown skin and waist-length black hair nodded. Emmanuel, Engineering. A playful-looking young man who had draped himself over the edge of his chair raised his hand to thank her. Vanessa, Chemistry. The girl almost got out of her chair but stopped herself. Nervously, she copied Emmanuel by waving her hand. Kyle, Renewable Energies. A frat boy who exerted very un-frat boy vibes nodded. He was the type that could deck anyone and definitely used his powers for good. Peter liked him. Peter, Lab B. This elicited odd looks from the older interns, but Peter just said thanks. It was no big surprise that any work Mr. Banner was doing would be confidential. Good luck, everyone. And tomorrow, dress to match me, she said, motioning to her jeans and old shirt. We get to be the scientist. Leave the suits to the higher-ups. Of course, if you get too high up, they start dressing like us again, she laughed. Have a good day. You'll get lunch at your departments today because we're running so late, but tomorrow I'll show you around the intern areas. Everyone filed out of the conference room in pairs. Liz took Peter over to the elevators. She was looking at him differently now. There had never looked down on him, but curiosity and he supposed respect were written on her face now. How'd you get assigned to Lab B? No one knows what's in there. They request research but never produce anything. She looked up at the ceiling, a bit unsure of herself. Friday, Lab B, please. Of course, the AI responded. The elevator jerked downward. I don't know, said Peter. He knew that Mr. Harrison had helped him out, but what would have happened if he hadn't made the selection? Was Mr. Harrison that confident in Peter's abilities? Liz looked incredulous at his response. The elevator numbers ticked down to 1 and then became letters. A, B. The elevator stopped. People always assume the cool stuff is up top, but I've always wanted to come down here, Liz commented as the doors opened. There was a small white room with a metal door in front of them. It was empty and reminiscent of a walk-in closet. Friday spoke. Thank you, Liz, I've got it from here. You may return to the upper floors. Disappointed but resigned, she motioned Peter out of the elevator and waved goodbye. That boy must be something to be down there. Peter stepped and walked towards the door, but as he did it, it opened. Bruce Banner peeked out. Eyes widening, Peter took a step back. He had promised himself that he wouldn't geek out. Of course, then he had convinced himself Mr. Banner wouldn't be there. The older man held up his hands. It's fine, I haven't been Hulk in years. Sadness filled his eyes. Another intern gone. So much for Roger's promises. Peter startled. No, it's just you're so cool. Like, your papers have probably done more for the world than the rest of this building. Like, I didn't even think I would ever meet you. I did a paper on you for science class. Did you know that you average 14 scientific papers a year? That's ridiculously many. Your radiation research prevented, like, thousands of kids from dying. He looked at the man's stunned face. I didn't mean anything by that. I just talk a lot, sorry. Tears remained in the edges of Bruce's eyes. Come on in, kid. His face creased with a small but welcoming smile. Chapter 6. The Lab. As Peter walked through the doorway, he noticed how thick it was. Easily 2 feet of steel. The walls were thick too. Inside, the room was large, with many other doors and hallways branching off of it. Each was labelled with its purpose, but for now, Peter just stared at the room in which she stood. Machines dominated it. There were large ones and small ones with buttons and ones with levers, those that were sunk into the floor and others that scraped the tall ceiling. Interspersed throughout the room were reading nooks, desks, and sitting areas with TVs. Dr. Banner looked a bit sheepish. I've never been very good at separating my personal life from my work. Sorry about the mess. I'll show you to your desk and then maybe we can go get some lunch. I've been told that you haven't eaten yet. Thanks, sir, Peter said, temporarily distracted from Mr. Banner by the room around him. Peter couldn't stop staring as he was led to a corner of the room. Only his spidey sense kept him from tripping over the wires that wound around the floor like the roots of a giant tree. In the corner, a square the size of a large classroom had been sectioned off with workbenches. There were several high-tech computers at a banged-up wooden desk. The workbenches held neatly stacked parts and equipment that Peter recognised from the papers Mr. Banner had published. Some shot electrons at high speeds, others tested how much radiation a reaction produced. Cool. It's not much, but this is your area. I figure you can help me run some experiments or do some of your own stuff. How much do you know about radiation? All of this was his. Peter was in awe. I know quite a bit, but I've got no practical experience. Unless, of course, you count being bit by a radioactive spider, of course. That was what started Peter's obsession with radiation, and later his interest in Dr. Banner. At first he had pored over the research. Everything about the spider experiment was classified, but he had hoped to figure it out himself. With no such luck, Peter now only occasionally read about it. Still, the hundreds of hours that he had sunk into research made him well versed in basically anything radioactive. Banner raised an eyebrow. Well, I'll have you read a couple of textbooks and all my papers before asking you to do anything. He motioned to a stack of papers several feet high. My research from the past 3 years. Sure, he wanted the kid to have a good time, but this was an internship after all. Peter looked at his feet. Very quickly he said, I've read them. What was that? I've read your papers. All of them. Bruce was starting to think that Mr. Harrison had underestimated the boy. Who reads shit like that in their free time? Did you have a favourite? Peter glanced up at Dr. Banner. The transmission of radiation between organisms through various means. It was the first paper of Dr. Banner's that he had ever read. It was his origin as a hero, but that was too much to say for now. Bruce stared at Peter for a moment. An old one. Interesting. Well, I'll find something else for you to read. For now, let's head up to the dining hall for lunch. They made their way back to the only unlabelled door on the floor. Bruce put on a hat and some sunglasses that lay on a table next to it and swung open the steel door. They stepped into the elevator and went up. Peter grinned. Hi, I hope you enjoy the podfic. If you do, please consider subscribing as I try to upload at least twice a week. It really makes my day. I'm taking requests, so if you have a favourite fic you would like covered, drop me a comment and I will reach out to the author for you. Have a lovely day.